For a business, the primary customer is the shareholders. ROI does not mean money. ROI could be return on whatever time I've invested to make whatever I want.
So ROTI is return on time invested.
Somebody may want to do an IPO, somebody wants a valuation, does not matter. The business has to deliver.
You have to be user-centric, customer-centered, but customer centricity is nuanced.
Have you experienced this very often? You give the customer exactly what they ask for and then you're dissatisfied with that?
Almost every time. Just because somebody said something doesn't mean that that's what they actually need. Welcome to the Yellow Couch.
Thank you so
Ramas.
much.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. You've been a mentor, a coach, a confidant, advisor to me and Hemal for so many years.
Yeah.
You know, I have spoken to you so often on so many topics. But today I wanted to dive into this interesting mashup of design and business, which I think is so relevant today, not just for digital first companies, but for businesses across the board. So, you know, this next half an hour or 45 minutes, I think it's going to be, you know, of course, a lot about your core expertise, which is about business, but also I'm going to push you to talk about your views on design.
Certainly.
And where you see the convergence of both those.
Absolutely.
So, such a pleasure, and I'm going to jump right in by first talking a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Ramas, you've been a consultant. You've been an out-and-out tech guy at Ramco Systems. You've worked in India. You've worked abroad. If you had to summarize today for people what you do, what would you say?
Funny enough, because how I introduce myself today is pretty much the topic of today.
Okay.
I essentially say that I help business owners design their business in line with the personal goals. That's, in summary,
Fantastic.
Simply put, that's all that I do. As a background, obviously, you know, I've started with corporate in manufacturing. At core, a manufacturing guy. But subsequently, I had a pretty good stint in consulting. And then I was in IT, like you rightly said, India, abroad. Then came back to consulting and then started off on my own. It's now 15 years. So it's just that width of experience has helped me kind of even think about myself in this manner. Because I did start off by talking about myself as a consultant. But let me tell you, when you tell somebody the consultant, it's not like people have a great imagery about it to begin with, but honest to God, right? There are various jokes about consultants all over the place. And we were told many of those jokes when we started.
But why is that, Ramas, if I can just kind of
Oh,
ask
absolutely.
you? Why do consultants have this,
I'll be very happy to
this
say
baggage?
that. Yeah. First of all, I was impressed when I got to know when I was living in the UK that the word consultant actually comes from the medical profession. I wasn't aware. So there are three kinds of doctors.
Told me about this. Is very interesting.
Yeah.
Please remind me again.
Yeah, because I believe that's important because that I think is a core dharma, which somewhere gets vitiated in the intellectual discussion that happens. Therefore, I thought it's important to say that. There they look at somebody as a family physician, we call GP, family doctor. Yeah. Then they have consultants, and then they have surgeons.
Okay.
So if you see, the family physician is a holistic person who takes care of you as a whole, not deep, wide, and gets to know you more as a person and immediately responds, right?
Yeah.
And it's more a personality driven. And like I'm sure you will remember in the olden days, the family doctor is the one who used to refer her to specialists.
Yeah.
And that's a consultant.
That's a consultant.
A consultant is a person who goes deep, right? And actually understands a particular issue very well. And he or she may not really know the width of it. So you are an orthoped, oncologist, so on and so forth. They are called consultants. And by definition, they are supposed to start and end an engagement in that format. So you go consult with them, and like in olden days, you were supposed to pass back on to the family physician for overall care. And third was a surgeon. And well, I didn't intend it that way, but I used the word deep. So I'm going to say typically a surgeon goes deeper, if you will,
of course. For
want of various reasons. You know, he or she is specific, but the difference between a surgeon and a consultant, which is where some of the jokes of consultants come, is that the surgeons act, a consultant advise.
Oh.
Right? And consultant's role stops by giving you a prescription. And unless you act on it, the results are not going to come.
Wow.
The consultant takes care of diagnosis. So they start off with a starting assumption. Typically, what the GP gave as specs and what you tell as symptoms. They ask you for blood tests, ask you for an X-ray or an MRI or whatever. And based on their experience in the depth, they actually analyze it and they come back and give you a diagnosis. Right? And the diagnosis is what you're supposed to act on a prescription. But they are not the ones who are feeding you the medicines. And that's where the consultant comes from. So very often consultant tends to give a report, something that I haven't done in the last 15, 16 years because I simply refuse to do it. Because when you give a report and things don't work out, very often you don't know what's the reason. So consultants, a lot of jokes come because they believe that consultants only merely advise and don't take responsibility for actions. That's not necessarily true, but hey, that's a perception one lives with. So from that background, when I started my first company, Aspire, and then Tab, and now I'm a coach, I was kind of pretty adamant that I need to break that rhythm. So first thing, I therefore started working with SMEs, or what I call as owner-managed businesses. Because I just realized that the owner is putting his or her own money into the business. So pretty much the way you have experience, I'm very sure. So when you go through the business, and that's where you said, we work together, right? So what helps me working with you and Hemal is that as business owners, what you bring in is what you want from the business. As a coach, as a consultant, I'm able to understand that and give you diagnosis, but you need to act on it, right? And that's where the results come. So I was kind of worried. So I said, look, if I go and work with owner-managed businesses who are putting in their own money, then they are much more eager to implement. The second bit we changed.
So the prescription doesn't stay the prescription, it actually ends up getting acted on.
Being enacted upon. Because for them it's important, right? It's urgent, it's their money, it's not spending somebody else's money. The second bit is I kind of tweaked it a little bit because like a surgeon mix-up, if you will. I said, look, I charge for implementation, I don't charge for advice. So even today when I go, I do the diagnosis, I give my advice in a presentation, whatever it be, I don't charge for that ever. If it's getting into implementation, I do, and I link my fees to the benefit. So that's pretty much what I do. And working with owner-managed business across various industries has been excellent. And you gave a brief introduction. So I must say how much I enjoy working with you and Hemal as well.
Thank you, Ramas.
And in this topic, why should I say I enjoy with you so much? Because it's never been a one-way street, right? So knowing about how you go about your business helps me do my job better. I mean, I'm not saying this just for the heck of it. I've said so many times to you that the principles of how you help your customers achieve their goals is what I do. So in summary, I help owners design their businesses in line with their personal vision.
So it's interesting, right? So you help people design their business. I help people design experiences. So we're both designers.
Absolutely.
And we're both designing for a specific business outcome.
Absolutely.
Tangible, measurable outcome.
Correct.
But I'm sure that your approach and your process to it is, maybe the steps are the same, but you probably call them something else. And one of the things I really wanted to kind of talk to you about today is when it comes to the design field, I think there's been a kind of this reputation that designers tend not to think about the business aspect so much, or they tend to have trouble accounting for that. And so I just wanted to kind of get your advice on how can we be more business oriented in our endeavor to create digital experiences or designs. Because ultimately we are looking for business outcomes, right? So in your experience of working with us or with others who are in a similar field, what would you say is the problem and how do we solve it?
Absolutely. Again, a great question, simply because the last many years, I've seen this three-way street, right? I'm helping owners design their businesses in different industries. I have a few customers, some of whom you know and you've worked with as well, for whom user experience and software is a core part of what they do. And then I know how you guys go about it, right? So it's kind of a third. So let me draw this analogy. First of all, one common thing I keep telling business owners that the business is the product of the customer design, right? That's how we always say that. So for a business, the primary customer is the shareholders. Now your question actually starts off from there because most business owners or even leaders, corporate, doesn't matter. They are very enamored by the product of their business, which means somebody's in services. You ask anybody, what do they do? They very rarely talk about the shareholder vision, their personal vision, and what the business delivers to them. They don't talk about that. They talk about what their products deliver to their customers. So they'll talk about the product design, they will talk about the features, functionality, You could be in services, insurance, software, manufacturing, does not matter. So I think that's where the crux is. But both are very similar because both start from customer experiences and accountability and ends with ROI. So in a business, I have to take care of my customers so that I get ROI. ROI does not mean money. ROI could be return on whatever time I've invested to meet whatever I want. Somebody may want work-life balance, somebody will want to have a business that is scaling, somebody may want to do an IPO, somebody wants a valuation, does not matter. The business has to deliver. So coming to design, I think it's very similar. If today, as an organization, you're helping your customers deliver design value, it's very important for you to segregate that and say, hey, look, we are doing this design process, which is delivering some value to your users. But at the same time, your true internal customers are the stakeholders. So does this design give ROI for them? Then all of a sudden, these two becomes very, very clear, very distinct. So if we keep in mind that there are two kinds of customers, one the customer to the project and one is customer to the engagement, if I were to use a loose word. When you do a design engagement with a customer, who is the customer to that engagement? It is the stakeholders, the economic buyers, the business itself. And there's a customer to the application you may deliver, which is the end users. It could be a customer. I think this distinction in my mind is what...
Have you ever experienced a case where the business goals and the end customer goals are opposing?
It's not like have I encountered a case.
Okay.
It's every case.
Every case.
Obviously. Because if you ask any customer today, they want the best quality, they want the best product, they want everything best, likely free of cost.
Wow. So they're,
it's natural.
By nature of it, they are opposites.
Need to be.
And
it's the ROI that binds it. Why? Because while the customer is looking at value for money, see, we use this terminologies very easily when it comes to a customer experience. We don't think of the same thing as a business. We see as being dichotomous. They aren't. So if a customer is looking at the features, functionality, looking at what benefit they need, a product, I'm paying a price, right? So when they are putting a value to a price, hey, I've got to put a price or a return to the time I give to it. So these two are meant to be opposite, and that's the check and balance. What's the role of a management team? What's the role of a leadership team? It's exactly to help achieve this balance. And balance does not mean average. I think you and I know this. I hate averages. It means giving something of this, something of that, so that both of us are happy. So rather than use the word balance, I would say win-win.
Win-win.
Knowing I may ask 10 things, but I need 2 or 3 inevitably. Similarly, the business may have so many requirements. They also need 2, 3. And as a business leader, as a design engineer, as a CEO, doesn't matter. If I'm able to align these two of both sides, and that's 100% possible, the rest of it can be managed. That's the way I look at it.
Wow. You know, because in the design world, this is something that people haven't made their peace with, right? So for example, I'll give you an example. So if you're designing an IVR system, you know, like the system that you call, let's say a help desk, and it says, press 1 to do this, press 2. So if you analyze that problem, an end user never wants to deal with an IVR.
Absolutely.
Right? No matter how small their request is, they want to talk to a human being.
Correct.
What does the business want? They never want you to talk to a human being because human beings are costly. Completely opposite goals. They don't want, the business doesn't want a human being, the user always wants a human being. So how do you design an IVR?
Very interesting.
Right? But what you said, that the fact that these are opposites is natural, and they must be opposite.
Absolutely.
Because the user always wants the best.
Correct.
And the best in this case is talking to a real person.
Absolutely.
No matter how small my request is, maybe my request is just order a checkbook in the case of banking.
Absolutely.
Right? But I want to tell a human being that.
Absolutely.
So I guess the design world has always struggled with coming to terms with this. And I guess it's because we've traditionally the design processes have been very weak in appreciating the business side of things. So with your help today, I want to kind of peel the onion a little bit on what we could do in our design processes, how we could inculcate this kind of business-oriented thinking and outcome orientation that delivers better results.
Absolutely.
Because it's design is notorious for being very hard to measure when it comes to outcomes.
Correct. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Though I would disagree.
Okay.
Because I think I do agree with you in what you said, that we do believe that it's very difficult to measure outcomes. But because it is difficult is what is a differentiating factor. I mean, if you are able to do it better, you get benefit.
Yeah.
So I'm a coach or a consultant, right? So I was thinking about your problem as I was, as you were speaking. And I have a similar analogy of an IVR with a different customer, but it's better I take your example. So let's just take this example and apply it in practice. You just made up that very valid thing because I was almost going to tell you I hate IVRs. So I'm honest to God.
Because every customer does.
Correct. But now you presented it as a design problem, so I've got to think about it. So here is the point, right? Now, the fact that IVR exists means that there is a need for it on both sides. So if we accept that IVR is anti-customer and a user speaking is anti-business, we have a problem. It's not either or. Let's make it and as we speak. So let's think about it for a while. What does an IVR achieve for a business? It cuts costs, right? It actually helps, get them into a situation where recruiting, managing. If I have call center people who are fairly irate because they're taking a lot of, useless calls, and if I were a call center person and I'm answering the same question, for example, a credit card balance or a telephone, actually this is where it starts, right? So 95 to 98% of calls and questions are standard.
Yeah.
Now, if I am a human being kind of answering those questions for the fifth, sixth customer, I'm going to be irritated.
Yeah.
And that's not what the customer wants. So suddenly you have a bulb. So you want to give a customer a steady experience.
Yeah.
Second, if you're going to add a call center which is humongous, you're going to increase the prices for the customer.
At the end of the day, if the customers has to pay.
And if the number of people are fewer, like in a hotel, similar situations,
the wait times are higher.
Wait times are higher. So what can we do in an IVR? I'm throwing this out of my head, okay? For example, if you start the call by saying that, hey, we have high traffic, your wait time is 8 minutes. You have quantified it? If you believe it can help, we have a few standard questions for you. Just that one bit. Now, you've not shout the customer straight to an IVR, which is what that customer hates. If you give respect to the customer and give a customer an option to either go to a person or get their issues resolved, and I'm saying this by experience, we found almost 78% of the people going to the equivalent of an IVR in the business we thought. So this is a great example of how the business must understand that what I'm doing is not for myself. It circles back to my customer. And the customer needs to understand what I'm asking is not for myself, it circles back to the business. You can't expect the customer to do this thinking, right? That's where we as business leaders, we as consultants, coaches, CEOs, management leaders, design thinkers come into the being. They are supposed to think on behalf of the customers and the business and find that this and that point.
Wow.
That's the way I always look at it.
So interesting. It's almost the same approach, actually.
Maybe you could explain what you do. I will learn from it as well. So how do you go about it, solving these challenges in design?
So the way we do it is, again, you use the word balance, right? So obviously the goal of any designer in this situation would be to find the happy medium.
Yeah.
So the happy medium in the case of, let's say, a hospital IVR, for example. Let me take that example. Now, it's an emergency. Absolutely. I've called a hospital and I hear an IVR. That's the last thing I want to hear, right? So what I would do in that case is I would put up front something called high anxiety actions, right? So if this is an emergency, that's the first thing you should say.
Absolutely.
Then please dial 1.
Absolutely.
For anything else, if you want to go to dental, you want to go to radiology, then you go through all of this other
Great example.
Stuff. So there is a way to find a happy medium.
I totally am in sync.
And it's really about listening carefully to the business and the end user.
Correct.
To try to find that. middle
Absolutely.
ground.
I totally agree.
And this is the case with almost, like you said, almost every case. It's not rare.
Absolutely.
You know, whether
Every
it's a
case.
bank or whether it's a healthcare situation, it's a fintech or an edtech. In fact, the opposites aspect, the paradox aspect of design is so common. It comes out in the nature of the briefs I get in general. So for example, when I ask clients, who's your customer? They will actually literally say this, I'm quoting, my target customer is everyone, right? Which is a paradox. It cannot be a target if it's everyone, right?
true.
And so that is a paradox
Correct.
that you have to, decipher. The other favorite one of mine, paradox, is I want to innovate without any risk. That's not possible.
There you go.
Right? So after 20 years of doing this, I realized that every design intervention starts with paradoxes.
Absolutely.
All requirements are paradoxical.
Spot on. I totally
And
agree.
I don't know if you experience the same when you work with owner-managed businesses. I guess
No,
it's a
I could
rhetorical
play this back
question.
to you. Okay, so let's play it back. So I get the same. You call it the brief. I call it the problem statement. Or
Yeah.
I go
But
to
the problem statement never comes from people, right? It's almost like you have to
100%.
get
You have to
down
price it open, because what you're going to hear is symptoms, and most importantly, you're going to hear that which is most pressing and most burning and most painful, and even more funny. You have multiple users in an organization. I go to different departments, different functions. While they will speak in a language that the business is hurting, I've realized it's never about the business, it's about themselves.
Right.
It's what I am measured by, what I am accountable to, and how this challenge is hurting me from doing my job, because people are good. It's just that they're being blocked from doing what they're. So let's take this example. If I go to a business owner and speak about strategy, what's your focus area? Oh, we are very good at focusing everywhere. Sounds familiar?
Yeah. Okay.
And we talk about the fact that we say that, look, about how do you know the problem statement, right? He says, and then he starts thinking. So we get into segmentation. We then start. So pretty much what you're saying, and the balance is they believe that the customer wants everything for free. And sometimes it takes me a lot of time to tell them, no customer is expecting anything for free. They may be saying and you're hearing it, but that's not what they want, because there's no free ride. Everybody knows that. The point is, are you doing a good job in selling and communicating? So stepping back, I think ZEUX in its role, or me as a coach, or even the leadership team. By the way, I believe that the leadership team in an organization has the same role as us, right? In terms of managing their business and their people. Our job is to say exactly what you said, is to hear the things that are possibly not said, and be able to understand both sides of the story. And my favorite one, by the way, this is my core belief, which I found to be very powerful. Irrespective of the paradoxes, I start with the belief that there must be a shared goal. That belief, I think, is most powerful. Because I have a simple rule. If that common goal doesn't exist, why are you even talking to me?
Common goal between the
Two
internal
people.
shareholders or the customers and the business?
Everywhere. So if I'm saying that they say that this is what my customer wants, this is what the business wants, the fact that that customer is buying from the business, and the fact that the business is choosing to sell to the customer, means there is a common ground.
Common.
Now, the way we speak about it, it's almost like me versus you. And it's fun, it's colorful, and it's good for a coffee table. But I believe when you come into a conference room to design a solution, it cannot be this. So our job, again, I'm bringing all three together, whether you're a consultant or a coach or a leader or a manager, our job is actually to listen to everybody with this faith that there is a common ground and I'm supposed to help you find it. Then you get ROI and customer satisfaction at the same time. And every time it's possible. Otherwise, that customer would have bought products from somebody else, and I would have been selling somewhere else.
So you just have to find that common ground.
And I think that's where the design thinking starts, whether it be my business design or a product design or an app design. I think design thinking starts from that. And I believe design thinking, to go on, I think you and I had this discussions a few times. People believe design thinking starts by asking the customer what they need.
Yeah.
I think that's not the true thing. You'll go wrong. You should start by actually asking what the customer wants to achieve. And that's where the last thing that you asked, the second part of your story about
That's so interesting.
quantifying design. The reason we are not able to quantify anything about design or services in general very often is because we start by asking what are your pain points, what can I solve? Instead, we say what are the benefits you're hoping to get if this problem is solved? What's the goal? Asking a simple question like why are you choosing to live with this problem right now? What's the value of a good solution to you? There are many questions like these. Because if you go to a doctor, the doctor, you're going to tell him I'm feeling pain, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. That's what we're going to talk. The doctor will come back and ask you, what else have you tried?
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And sometimes the doctor asks you, hey, do you have a job that's sitting in a posture? You see what that doctor is trying to do, a good doctor? A good consultant is first of all even thinking whether this problem is worth solving or not. Because there may be a surgery required, and this is usually, I'll give you an example again. Very often you find that the customers quickly come to senses of a balance when you give them the alternative. Again, if you go to a person and they were expecting a simple solution, a pill, a doctor, and you tell them, look, these are not going to work. You need a surgery. See, so even the customer has an ROI. So both of us have an ROI. And design thinking is all about, whether it be in business, I help owners design, find the ROI. And in our case, we have to figure out a way to help our customers find the ROI. And pointed question, it's all three. There is a customer, there is a stakeholder, and there is a person providing the design. I think that mix-up has to happen. Does that sound sensible?
Yeah, no, that's actually so true. In also the way we approach problem definition and the way we try to find common ground. And one thing you said, which is so true, that you might hear something from a customer, but is that what they really need? So just because somebody said something doesn't mean that that's what they actually need.
Yep.
Right? Which is something that takes many years for people to understand after a while, because there is now understanding and acceptance of the fact that you have to be user-centric, customer-centered, but customer centricity is nuanced.
Absolutely.
And it cannot be simplistic in its approach, right? That you ask people to fill a survey and the survey said, I want such and such, and you take it at face value and you build your entire product suite around it, and then you are like, why didn't this work?
Absolutely.
What happened?
Absolutely.
So when you go into a situation and you have to quickly get a hold of what's going on here, I mean, what's the broad process like? Because, I mean, you talk to the owners. Yep. I'm assuming you talk to some team members, you probably look at the product.
Absolutely.
But do you get a chance to speak to the customers outside?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
As a formal kind of process?
Oh yeah. And that's where sometimes research matters quite a bit. So going back to our analogy, I'm saying that ZEUX is as much a consultant as I am. You are in the user experience creation, I'm in the business design. What does research actually mean? People come to us, and by the way, there's a sense of humility here. I genuinely believe nobody comes to me for ideas. And I'm saying this all the time. And today it's become easy to tell people this. A few years ago, they would laugh at me. Today I'm saying, no, you just go to ChatGPT. So ideas are for free. And opinions are for free. Experience is valuable.
Wow.
So I'm going there simply because I know the various ways it fails. So it's not about ideas that work, it's about ideas that do not work and helping them pick the ideas that work. Let me give a favorite analogy of mine. People laugh when I say this. I use it quite literally when I talk to a customer. A child cries, right? To want to go to school, right? And the child says, I don't want to go to school, I don't want to go to school, I don't want to go to school. So you as a dad or my wife or mom and all of us dads and moms, we do what the customer wants.
Yeah.
Don't tell the child to school, right? Don't send the child to school, give him chocolates, toffees, mobile, keep the customer extremely delighted. That kid is going to grow up and say, Tu baapta ki main. So you are my dad, you've been there, done that. I asked not to go to school. but that's not good for my goal.
That's a great analogy.
So you've got to distract the child sometimes, love the child sometimes, force the child sometimes. That's called parenting. It's a combination of all these. So a consultant sometimes, of course, we are not parents to the clients, we are parents to the solution. Because we have seen that across. So to answer your question back, that's where research helps. You have spoken to not only your customer, you try to speak to your customer's customer, you try to speak to competitors to the customer.
You've understood the landscape.
Yeah. And very often I kind of ensure that my customer who is a business owner actually does this on my behalf with questions we have discussed, because sometimes they just assume stuff. This helps. We use tools like a value chart. There are various tools that we use to help the business owner. So coming back, it's not about the ideas. It's about the experience. And that, to that extent, yes, you need to know how things fail very often. And so it's all about cutting the time to benefit.
Wow. Yeah.
Left alone, all our clients, all our users have the intelligence and the brain power to reach the solution sooner or later. Am I going and cutting their time to benefit? That's the quantification of value.
Speaking of benefit,
Yeah.
what's the single biggest challenge with helping businesses change or derive benefit from your work?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, I'll tell you the single biggest benefit and the challenge.
Okay.
The single biggest benefit is very often helping the owner design their business in line with their DNA.
Yeah.
That's a crux. And let me take an analogy to design. When you design, you talk to your customers, but then you have some few design principles, whether it be the brand colors, the brand logo, the brand ethos.
Yes.
There are a few things that you say are design principles that are non-compromisable.
First principles.
Okay, you call them first principles.
First
Right?
principles, yeah.
Unfortunately, most business owners do not have this view. What happens is they look at their businesses, sometimes leadership also. They look at scaling their business, growing their business from a lens of outsiders. It's almost like stock market. They are not listed. That doesn't matter. So everybody wants to grow. Why grow? They don't have an answer. Grow what? They don't have an answer. They want to scale. They want to do an IPO. They want to do valuation. Nobody knows why. And more importantly, what's the cost of that? There's a big trend happening many times in the world over where people are starting to delist their companies from the stock market because it doesn't meet their personal vision.
Correct.
So to me, the biggest benefit I keep saying is ROTI, R-O-T-I. And I don't want to go to the extent of saying entrepreneurs invest their life. That sounds too kind of little cheesy. They do invest their time. So are you getting enough return for your time?
So ROTI is return on time invested.
Absolutely. ROTI is return on time invested. Because why? Especially in a country like India, we're so blessed to be here today. At the same time, if they were investing with their colleagues who's working somewhere else in a big corporate, they could be actually making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Whereas here, they are busy discounting their customers and products. So you need to get the return on time invested.
So you're saying the biggest benefit is aligning their business to their DNA.
So if this is what I want for myself, and I usually say there are 3 core DNAs according to me in my research of meeting thousands of business owners. It's actually quite simple really because there are patterns. So I call it freedom, wealth and ambition.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurs want to be in business because they want to have a personal freedom, they want to have a work-life balance. They don't want to work for anybody else. Then there are people who start businesses for wealth. They want money, ROI, business communities. And there are people who want to do it for their aspiration, ambition, brand, scale, big. Now you ask anybody, are you ambitious? The answer is yes. But what is the cost of that ambition? And that's where the DNA comes. So a business owner is happy.
What
and
price are you
successful.
willing to pay?
Absolutely.
Really, that's the question.
I think if you're successful and happy, that's probably what I do with them. Designing a business, it's aligned with their DNA.
So once you have unlocked that DNA, you go about starting to try to align the way the business works.
Absolutely.
What roadblocks do you usually face and what is the biggest kind of impediment in making this happen?
Sure. Great. And I'm again going to kind of borrow and try to map. The lingos may be different.
Sure.
I find that the design process is same since time immemorial. It is probably the language in the industry different. So we start with this designing of the goals. Then we start with the design principles, which is aligning the Then we actually go about building a business model. Business model is equivalent to a prototype and getting customer validation. So before we do the real thing, we want the customer to say, hey, this is what I really wanted. Because very often, I'm sure, have you experienced this? Very often you give the customer exactly what they ask for and then they're dissatisfied with that.
Almost every time.
See, great. So the business model of the prototype, because people, what they say and what they see. So similarly, when you show a business model with an Excel and the numbers and the cash flow design, we have software that gives them a what if analysis. Till then, there's no software. I believe it's all about the vision. Then we go about executing the project, which is delivering results. But if you didn't have a goal, you don't know how to measure it. So we put in a review process in place where we regularly review it. And finally, you need agility in design, agile thinking to be able to change if things can course correct, right? Continuous improvement. So this is a process. So what's the roadblock we hit? Simply firefighting. It is this balance between short-term, long-term, balance between strategy. Because most people believe strategy is a flowery statement. They believe strategy is a someday goal.
So they're so busy in the day-to-day.
Customers screaming.
That they don't have the time to step back and do this alignment.
So they mix up with that. So they just believe that once I plan and put it in an Excel or a PPT and store it, and then somehow I keep on doing what I'm doing today, I'll reach there. So getting them outside their business frequently and make them think like investors rather than the head of departments is the biggest obstacle I face.
I'm going to borrow that in our design process.
Yeah, please.
Because I think it's the same challenge we have.
Absolutely the same.
The designing of the actual solution is the easiest part of my job, actually.
True.
The toughest part of my job is the change management aspect of it, actually.
So true. It's exactly the same.
So, Ramas, I'm almost at the end. I'm going to ask you a question that I usually ask at the end of this series. This segment is called Unpopular Opinion.
Okay, you're warning me rather than telling me. Okay, I get it.
So, what is the one thing that that you tell people or you advise businesses or business owners that tends to be unpopular?
You know why that's tough? There are so many things I tell them which is unpopular because I think that's the reason they come to me. But I think the most unpopular thing I tell them is be accountable to yourself before you expect ownership from your employees.
Wow, I've heard that.
So what happens is most people believe that the problem, there's no ownership of the employees, and I ask them.
They believe problem somewhere else.
That's even more macro. I'm saying it's even more immediate. You're right, but immediately it's like, oh, if I were there, I would have done it. My employees are not doing this. I expected them to think for themselves. And I say, sorry, are they the owners? Why are you expecting ownership? You are the owner. They are helping you reach the goal. They are also entrepreneurs where they're investing their time and they need the return for the time, whatever you're paying them. It could be ESOPs, it could be salary, but the ownership is with you. So I find most business owners not taking accountability for their strategic plan and giving it the time, energy, attention that it deserves, right? And I have this mandatory request, 2 mandatory requests, which is also unpopular. So it's the same train. I figured out 2 things by which I measure this. First of all, I tell all my clients that is usually health, family, and goals, which means you would never postpone my meeting because of a customer.
Okay.
If you're interested in your customer of the business, you're not ready to take care of your shareholders. So it's health, family, and our engagement, which is for the long term. I can't help you if you're not going to help yourself. That's one. Second funny thing, I never go, and I'm sure you know this also. For all strategic discussions, I tell the owners to go out of their office. I would never go and visit them in their offices. Now, why do I say this is important? And this is true in your case also, I'm very sure. Why do we do sometimes boardroom, conference room? I've seen you use workshop tools so effectively, right? You go to the whiteboard. I mean, trust me, the first thing I see you do is go to the whiteboard. Why do you essentially do that? Because for the person sitting in front of you, if they are in a comfortable terrain, they're going to do the things that they every day do.
It's the same thing again.
They called you in to do something different. So first thing is to take them out of their comfort zone.
To change thinking, first change the environment, right?
Absolutely. So these are 2 things which and so without a doubt, that's the most unpopular and the tough portion that I go through.
Fantastic. So Ramas, I'm going to wrap it up there. And because I want to leave stuff for our part 2.
Oh, okay.
And many other parts to come, because there's so much that we need to uncover at the convergence of design and business. I want to thank you for coming today.
But before you thank, I want to say something.
Okay,
right?
please.
It's not something I've ever told you before. I enjoy working with you and Hemal for a specific purpose, and specifically with you. Because I always believe you are an ultimate consultant yourself. So I must say that I'm more scared of coming and talking to you than with most other people. Right? I've never told you this,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
But it's mutual respect, right? So I definitely did mean it. That not only the way you build ZEUX here, right? The whole organization, the team, the vibrancy, and the way you both are building the organization has been kind of a very good thought process for me to learn, as well as to refer people to.
Wow.
So I thank you as well, right?
That
Because
means a
it's
lot.
been a great experience.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And until we meet again on the Yellow Couch, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.